The two had prepared for what was to come today. They would attempt to bring the others here because after thinking about it, Cheong-san had seen that it was the better option. He had told her that he couldn't risk them trying to take the food with them. It would be inefficient and dangerous. Plus, the others could use more space. He doubted the small, cramped broadcast room was easing any tensions. They got out of the back room, crouching on the ground with Na-Yeon behind Cheong-san. He looked at the zombie that was at the piano. It wasn't making noise, mostly because it couldn't see them. "Can you get me an extra blanket?" She didn't know why he was asking, but she went and got one. Cheong-san silently maneuvered to the piano, and just as the zombie was about to turn to him, he threw a sheet to cover its form before he started bashing it with his bat. It took quite a few powerful swings before it went silent, and he quickly ducked as some zombies had been attracted by the noise. He made his way back to Na-Yeon, who had her hands all over him, checking if he was okay. "I'm fine, no need to worry, but now comes the hard part," he said as he looked to the door. The plan was simple. He would go to the others and help them prepare to come down to the classroom. Na-Yeon would be waiting to open the door for them. There were so many parts of this plan that could go wrong, and it made him nervous. "Are you ready?" he heard Na-Yeon ask in front of him. Cheong-san gave her a tight nod as they made their way to the door. There were 2 zombies waiting in front of the classroom at the far end, which meant he would have enough time to run off before they got their marbles. "We need to cover and block these windows. We're too exposed." He didn't want to do it now, but he knew that delaying any longer would only make this worse. So he got to the door and peeked over at the surrounding areas, making sure to see any lurking zombies. There were none. He turned to face Na-Yeon and was at a loss for words. He didn't know what to say or how to even act, and still felt very awkward. But thankfully, Na-Yeon had the answer as she gave him a kiss on the cheek. "Be back soon, okay?" "Okay," he agreed with a small smile on his face. They silently opened the door as best they could, and Cheong-san stepped out. The zombies turned to him as Na-Yeon closed the door and ducked like she had been told. Cheong-san immediately attacked the zombies, making sure they were only 2. If he could get rid of them quickly, he could make it out of there without any problems. After some struggle, he managed to defeat the zombies, but he knew he couldn't dwell on his victory for long and rushed up the stairs. He ran into a few zombies, pushing some out of the windows and others down the stairs. There were a few close calls when a zombie had managed to bite on his arm, but luckily, he had it wrapped up tightly in makeshift armor, and the bite didn't make it through. He skidded in front of the broadcast room door, banging frantically. "Open up, it's me, Cheong-san," he said, hoping someone was listening and he wouldn't have to say it louder. "Hurry up!" He could hear some shifting behind the door, and then a small opening was made so that whoever was guarding the door could look out of it. "Cheong-san, is that?" He was looking around frantically. "Yes, it's me. I don't have time for hellos. A zombie could come and eat me right now." He heard what he could guess items barricading the door being thrown from the door before it quickly opened. Cheong-san rushed in as he saw a zombie out of the corner of his eye down the hall. "Cheong-san, it's good to see you," he heard Soo-hyuk say, and he felt a hug from Onjo. "Nice to see you guys too, but we don't have time to talk. We have to find a way to move you guys from here." He looks around at the shocked faces. "To where? There's no better place than here right now," he heard Woo-jin say from the back. "No, there is. You guys haven't eaten or drunk anything in a couple of days. We found a place with supplies where we can plan our next move." They knew what he was talking about when he meant that statement, but were surprised by how relaxed he was about it. "Okay, that sounds good, and all, but we can't all make it. We barely made it here. Trying to move again would be suicide," said Jun-young. "Not necessarily," Namra said from her chair, garnering everyone's attention as she stood up. "We just have to distract the zombies long enough for us to get to the classroom," she said, no emotion betraying her face. "And how are we supposed to do that?" asked Daisoo. She let out a small smile and then settled into her cold demeanor again. "With this," she said, pointing at a microphone. "Power has been still around for a while, but I'm not sure how long that's going to be for, so we need to use it now and distract them." Cheong-san could understand the gist of her plan. "Okay, so we make some noise, then what?" he asked. "Well, The noise will draw them to the speakers, and if you guys paid attention, you would know where the speakers are all over the school. She walked to the window as everyone followed and started pointing some of the speaker towers out. There are those out there, but we can try to use them for a bit before we draw too much attention to ourselves. Everyone nodded, not even questioning her. Sometimes being class president had its merits. The speakers in the halls are the best placed actually, as they're placed at each end of the hall and corners of a classroom, which should help us split them and avoid some running out of classes and getting us. The plan was sound as everyone looked around at each other. "How long did you have that plan?" Dae-soo asked confusedly. "I made a plan when I saw that they're attracted to sound, but then everything started happening and we got distracted." Soo-hyuk and Cheong-san's eyes met each other because they knew the sooner the better. "Everyone get ready, because we are doing this right now." "What?" shouted Jun-young before he quickly covered his mouth. "We need more time to plan things." But Cheong-san just shook his head. "That will only make things worse. You saw the field out there. More of them are gathering, and the longer we take, the harder it's going to be to get out, and we will be weaker too." Jun-young was trying to think of a reason to say no, but judging by the stares and how some were avoiding his eyes, he knew they were going to do it regardless. "Fine." So they set on preparing, with Cheong-san helping Soo-hyuk and An-jo with their makeshift armor with whatever was around. Soo-hyuk made sure to help Nam-ra, much to An-jo's displeasure. Cheong-san could see it more clearly now, how he had always pushed aside his feelings to help pursue hers, but he wasn't gloating or resentful about it, just at peace. "You seem different. Is everything okay?" He heard the voice of An-jo break his train of thought. "Yeah, I'm fine, just preparing myself." She grabbed his hand. "Don't worry, we will make it." He loved when she gave him a comforting touch, but a part of him that he had silenced for a long time knew how she had used it so many times against him. He nodded. "Let's go." The speakers around the school blurred to life loudly as the voice of Nam-ra broke through, as she started firstly by asking for any survivors, and then wishing them luck, saying what she was doing, and hoping they could also use the distraction. Meanwhile, on the other side of the school, Gui-nam heard the speakers burst to life. They were loud, painfully so, but the realization that Cheong-san might be with that little group helped him push on as he ran towards the broadcast room. The distraction was working as the group started heading out of the broadcast room with makeshift shields in case everything went to shit. They proceeded slowly but cautiously till they were on the classroom level. Soo-hyuk was waiting to guard Nam-ra as she broadcasted the signal and put something to keep making noise. She didn't want to do it for too long since she guessed they were probably attracting more zombies to the area. They left the classroom before they heard something shatter down the hall. It was one of the speakers. But how had it broke? They were high up on the wall, far from any zombies' reach. They didn't have time to answer as they were forced to change directions from where their classmates were in order to avoid the now much more alert and agitated horde. Soo-hyuk just grabbed Nam-ra's hand and burst into a sprint. Meanwhile, Cheong-san and the other students had made it to the classroom and were now waiting outside. At the same time, Gui-nam had gotten to the broadcast room and saw there was no one there. In his rage, he decided to start destroying all the equipment that was causing him all this pain before he ran in pursuit of whoever was closest. "Na-Yeon, it's Cheong-san," he said, and waited as they had their shields raised, awaiting an attack. He saw her peek her head from the bottom of the window and moments later heard the distinct click of the door being unlocked. Everyone quickly rushed in. "Okay, everyone, we don't know how long the distraction will last, so let's barricade this up." Na-Yeon could feel the stares from the other students before they headed to barricading the door, and she just stood there nervously shifting. "Where are Soo-hyuk and Nam-ra?" Cheong-san seemingly asked himself, pacing in front of the door before he felt a hand grab his sweater, stopping him. It was Na-Yeon, and she seemingly realized what she had done and quickly let go. He just stared at her. She looked so small again, nervously looking around, and he was about to go comfort her, but then the speakers let out a couple of crackles and then died. It went quiet for a moment before the banging of zombies against the classroom windows sounded. That seemed to push everyone into gear as they started rushing to put up any kind of barrier between themselves and the zombies. Na-Yeon even rushed in, doing her best to help Cheong-san put up the barrier. All An-jo could think about was where was Soo-hyuk. Was he okay? She really wished he was okay, but now the entrance was blocked. "Where are Soo-hyuk and Namra?" An-jo asked, looking at the others worriedly, and they all just looked at each other as they didn't have the answers. "We have to go back for them," she said, as if she were about to break down the barrier to go get them, as she struck a look at Cheong-san. Everyone else in the room seemed to not notice the look, but someone that had been paying a lot of attention to Cheong-san did. She's really trying to guilt-trip him into going, Na-Yeon thought, as her hand once again grabbed his sweater this time. When he looked at her, she didn't pull away. "We have to wait. We can't rush out there right now. Do you see how many of them there are? It would be suicide. We barely could open the door before they were on us," Cheong-san said, trying to make her see reason. She just looked at him with a scowl. "Would he do that for you?" Cheong-san didn't know how to answer that, so he chose not to, only looking down. They were all silent except for the roars and screams of zombies till they heard a knocking behind them by the other windows. They turned to be met by the backs of Soo-hyuk and Namra walking precariously on the windowsill. Some of the group rushed to open the windows as the two finally stepped in, taking large gulps of air. "Holy shit! We almost didn't make it," Soo-hyuk said, trying to catch his breath. Namra was behind him, trying to do the same while still maintaining her cold demeanor. "If it wasn't for," Soo-hyuk started, but stopped as he saw something he hadn't expected. Everyone waited for him to continue by, he just kept looking, and they all turned to see what was so interesting. To say they were shocked would be an understatement, as they turned to see Na-Yeon with her hand firmly held in Cheong-san's own, hiding slightly behind him. "Well, this is a surprise,"